It's been said again and again and again. Stop comparing Paralives to The Sims. You're hurting Paralives by doing this. We're going to ruin Paralives. Stop calling it a Sims killer. I don't think comparing Paralives will ruin it, but there are 3 ways we could ruin Paralives. Here's the thing. I know some of you won't agree with me on what I'm about to say, and what I'm gonna say will ruin the game. And that's totally okay. We're different people, we're allowed to have different opinions. Honestly, I expect some of you to disagree. Let's just agree to disagree, alright? Either way, if you're here, it's probably because you're excited, curious, or already a big fan of Paralives and the amazing team behind it. And that's great because, same. I'm a huge fan too. Which is exactly why I need everyone here to understand one thing. Paralives is an indie game that originally started with just one person. Thanks to the incredible support on Patreon, Alex was able to grow the team to what it is today. 15 people! Hey! That's still a very small team, especially when you compare it to, let's say, Maxis, or even Inzoi's developers. Which, by the way, they don't actually say how many people work on it online. I could not find the information, but I'm assuming a lot more than 15. Both of those games took years to develop with massive publishers behind them, EA and Krafton, respectively. We're talking literal billion-dollar companies here, okay? They've got entire teams of industry veterans who've worked on some of the biggest simulation games out there, and they're working on The Sims and they're working on Inzoi. Meanwhile, Paralives is a self-published project, which is kind of amazing when you think about it. Paralives is officially entering early access. And while that means we'll finally get to play it, it's important to remember early access doesn't mean finished. The game's still in development. There will be missing features, a few bugs here and there, and things are bound to change over time. That's actually the whole point of early access, to let players give feedback while the game is still being built. So, long story short, these circumstances aren't really comparable, but I do think players should still be able to mindfully compare these games. And let me tell you why. But first, can I get a what for today's sponsor? What? Instant Gaming! You already know it, Instant Gaming is the best place to buy video games online. That's because all of their games in their ever-expanding game library are discounted. You want a game for PC or console? No problem, search for it and then purchase it with one click. If you use the link in the video description, you're not only getting the best bang for your buck, but you're supporting the channel at no extra cost to you. Happy gaming! Number 1. Policing the way players view or play the game. No one likes a gatekeeper, even if you think you're doing it out of love or passion for the game. It doesn't matter. It's only natural that people will play or compare similar games. Honestly, I'd argue it's good for the industry when they do. Comparisons are what drive innovation in gaming. Of course, like we talked about earlier, Paralives and The Sims aren't on equal footing. But despite those differences, they both live in the life simulation genre, which makes comparison fair and useful as long as the expectations are realistic. Players should be able to compare these games consciously and respectfully without being told they're doing it wrong. The thing is, gatekeeping what players can or can't compare actually hurts game development and the community. When you tell people not to compare, you're kind of shielding big companies from criticism. Without comparisons, studios like EA have less of a reason to evolve. They'll just keep recycling old systems, adding microtransactions, and avoiding risk. On the other hand, open and healthy comparison sparks competition, and that pushes everyone to do better. Developers start improving features, pricing models, and the overall player experience, which is what we want, right? We want a better overall player experience. When players are encouraged to think critically, they learn what works, what doesn't, and why. When players are told not to compare, that critical thinking fades. What's left is instead, kind of like blind loyalty. Or negativity. No nuance, no meaningful discussion about design, storytelling, accessibility, or innovation. None of that. And this is kind of where gatekeeping really does damage. It fuels this us versus them mentality. Fans start feeling like they have to defend the game from outsiders. Instead of sharing insights or excitement across fandoms, communities get defensive and hostile. That kind of environment kills collaboration, whether that's in the modding space or just general cross-community creativity. But when comparisons are healthy and open, the opposite happens. Bridges are built, ideas are shared, and everyone benefits. Now, I can't say this for sure because I am not an indie developer, but I bet most indie devs want comparisons because it helps them understand what players value or miss from other games. If players feel like they can't compare, that feedback never reaches the developers, which means missed opportunities for improvement or innovation. Let's be real, that's the last thing we want. In the big picture, gatekeeping hurts the genre as a whole. Comparing and building on what came before is literally how genres grow. Paralives exists because Alex played The Sims. And imagine what else a life sim could be. That's how we got games like City Skylines and Stardew, by asking, how can we make this better? Gatekeeping stops that process. Without comparisons, genres risk being stagnant, stuck repeating the same formula instead of learning from both AAA and indie creativity. Honestly, if this kind of gatekeeping is already showing up in opinions, I can only imagine what's going to happen when people start posting Paralives playthroughs. Will it be suddenly frowned upon to do a 100 baby challenge or rags to riches in Paralives? Will players get harassed for just comparing their experience to The Sims? Because it will happen. Naturally. In fear of harming Paralives with unjust and unconscious comparisons, have we already begun to create a toxic community? This leads us to number 2, harassing the devs or other players. You don't like someone's opinion? Or maybe it's how they play. Maybe you're frustrated about how fast or slow development feels. Or maybe the devs added something you didn't want, or took away something you loved. No matter what happens or doesn't happen, one of the quickest ways players could ruin Paralives is by creating a toxic community through harassment, whether that's aimed at the developers or other players. Now, I'm not saying you can't be critical, of course you can. You should be, but it's all about being conscious, thoughtful, and constructive. There's really no point in being rude just for the sake of it, or at least that's my opinion. I don't know. A toxic community doesn't just hurt feelings, which is wrong. We shouldn't be going around hurting people's feelings on purpose. With that intention, it can genuinely harm Paralives as both a game and a community. First of all, it damages morale, and that can slow down development. Paralives isn't a massive studio with a whole PR department to absorb negativity. It's a small team of real people. So when harassment happens, whether it's aggressive criticism, unrealistic demands, or personal attacks, it hits them directly. They see that, you know? That kind of pressure can lead to burnout, discouragement, creative blocks, or even staff leaving the project altogether. And that, of course, affects how quickly and confidently the game grows. It doesn't stop there. Harassment can create a toxic feedback loop. When the devs don't feel comfortable sharing updates, transparency drops. And when transparency drops, players lose that special behind-the-scenes connection that made Paralives so unique from the start. Less openness means fewer opportunities for helpful, constructive feedback, and eventually both sides stop communicating. Everyone loses in that situation. That's a lose-lose. This isn't just theory. We've seen this happen in other communities before, and honestly, this toxic feedback loop exists in the Sims community. Maybe at a scale that impacts the game less because the developers don't really have to see that information, but it does happen and it does affect the community. Games like Paralives rely on player enthusiasm, word of mouth, and community creativity. If the fandom ever becomes known for hostility, new players and maybe even potential collaborators are going to avoid it. Plus, when that toxicity spreads, players start turning on each other. Over what? Not liking how someone plays? Disagreeing with someone's opinion? Expecting too much too soon? It's just not worth it. And that leads us to number 3. Expecting too much or not being mindful and realistic. I have to say it, unrealistic expectations are one of the biggest threats to any indie game. Especially one like Paralives, which has grown out of community hype. When players start building up ideas like, Paralives is the Sims 5 we've always wanted, or this will be the perfect life sim that fixes everything EA did wrong. They're creating a fantasy version of the game that doesn't actually exist. No matter how good Paralives turns out to be, it can't live up to that imagined level of hype. And when reality hits, people start feeling disappointed. Not because the game failed, but because their expectations were impossible to begin with. We've seen it before, and I know for a fact this is something that I feel all the time with like Sims 4 trailers. There's hype, I have these crazy expectations. I know they're not gonna happen, and when they turn out to not actually happen, I'm pretty disappointed. That kind of hype often flips to negativity the moment people realize Paralives isn't the perfect Sims replacement they had in their heads. The tone shifts from, "this will save the genre," to, "this isn't what I expected." That disappointment can spiral fast into review bombing, social media harassment, and a general, toxic wave throughout the community that drains morale and poisons the community atmosphere. When the loudest voices online are demanding the impossible, it drowns out the voices offering thoughtful, constructive feedback, the kind that actually helps the game improve. The truth is, Paralives is going to evolve over the next few years. If players jump in expecting a fully finished, feature pack experience, they might end up walking away early, and that hurts morale, development, and the long-term health of the game. But if players stay mindful and patient, they give the devs space to experiment, listen, and build something truly special over time. It's how Paralives will become the life sim is destined to be. I really believe the community plays a huge role in whether a game like this thrives or struggles. There are ways the community can unintentionally harm itself, its reputation, or even the game's development. But personally, I don't think that comparing Paralives to other games within its genre is one of those ways. Comparisons don't ruin games. Gatekeeping, harassment, and unrealistic expectations do. So what do you think? Do you agree, or do you see it differently? Let me know down below. I would love to hear your thoughts on this. Thank you for sticking around until the very end of the video. It's much appreciated. If you're excited for Paralives like me, I hope to see you again. Until then, stay happy, healthy, and hydrated. Bye!